All right, let me start like this. My name is Walter Hayes. I'm 81 years old. I live in Baltimore, Maryland, in the same part of the city I've lived in most of my life. I worked the docks here for a long time. After that, I spent years working nights as a security guard. That's about it, as far as titles go. I'm not used to talking to a camera, so if this feels a little slow, that's because it is. At my age, I don't rush my thoughts anymore. I've spent most of my life rushing everything else. A year ago, my wife died. Her name was Eleanor. We were married for over 50 years. Saying that number out loud still feels strange, like it belongs to someone else's life. Most of what I'm going to talk about today didn't make sense to me until after she was gone. That timing alone should tell you something. People like to believe life teaches you lessons as you go, nice and evenly, like a class you can keep up with if you pay attention. That wasn't my experience. For me, the important lessons showed up late, sometimes too late to use properly. I used to think I was ahead of most people, not smarter, not special, just early. I worked young, took responsibility young, stayed in one place, stayed married, stayed employed. From the outside, it looked like stability. I told myself that meant I was doing something right. What I didn't understand was that being early doesn't mean being wise. Sometimes it just means you haven't lived long enough to see the consequences yet. Most people learn that the hard way. I was one of them. When I was younger, I thought strength meant staying quiet, handling your business, not letting people see you bend. Especially as a black man, especially in the neighborhoods I grew up in, weakness wasn't just discouraged. It could cost you respect, work, sometimes worse. So I learned how to stay solid, dependable, closed off. I thought silence was discipline. I thought endurance was character. I didn't realize I was also building distance, brick by brick, from the people closest to me. I didn't talk about fear or doubt or the pressure that comes with carrying responsibility for decades without complaint. I thought that was maturity. I didn't realize I was teaching everyone around me not to ask how I was doing. You can't blame people for believing the version of you that you present every day. I learned that lesson late. I also learned too late that providing is not the same as being present. I worked hard. I paid bills. I showed up physically. In my mind, that made me a good husband and a good father. What I didn't notice was how often I chose exhaustion over attention. How often I listened just enough to respond, not enough to understand. I came home tired and treated that tiredness like an excuse to disengage. Kids don't remember how hard you worked. They remember whether it felt safe to talk to you. I learned that watching my children grow into adults who didn't come to me first with their thoughts, that one still sits heavy. Another lesson crept up on me quietly, without drama. I didn't waste time in obvious ways. I didn't party it away. I didn't burn my life down. I wasted time assuming things would stay the same. I assumed my body would keep cooperating. I assumed relationships would hold together if I didn't actively damage them. I assumed tomorrow would look enough like today that I didn't need to pay close attention. That kind of assumption doesn't feel reckless. It feels reasonable, responsible even. Until one day your knees hurt for no clear reason, or someone you love looks tired in a way that doesn't go away, or you realize you've been living on autopilot and calling it stability. I didn't lose years all at once. I lost them politely, comfortably, without noticing. One of the hardest lessons for me was realizing that most regret doesn't come from mistakes, it comes from avoidance, from the conversations you delay because they feel uncomfortable, from the apologies you plan to make later, from the truths you soften so much they stop meaning anything. Avoidance feels like peace in the moment. It keeps things calm on the surface, but underneath, it builds pressure. By the time you're ready to deal with it, the moment has passed, and now you're not fixing something. You're mourning it. I learned that sitting alone in quiet rooms that used to be full. The last thing I had to accept, and this one hurt my pride, was that a lot of my pain wasn't caused by what happened to me. It was caused by how long I held on to things that were already over. Jobs, roles, versions of myself that no longer fit. I told myself I was being loyal, consistent, strong. In reality, I was afraid to let go of identities that had expired. Letting go isn't weakness. Holding on blindly is. Most people don't learn these things early. Not because they're stupid, because they're busy, because survival doesn't leave much room for reflection, because life doesn't slow down to explain itself. I was one of those people. In the second part, I'm going to talk about what changed after I finally accepted that I was late. Not in some inspirational way, in small, daily ways. The kind that make life quieter, slower, and more honest when you stop pretending you have unlimited time and unlimited chances. When I finally accepted that I was late to understanding most of this, something unexpected happened. I didn't feel panic. I felt relief. For the first time in years, I stopped trying to outrun my own life. Late means you missed something. It also means you're still here to notice that you missed it. That distinction matters more than people admit. The biggest change wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with a speech or a promise to do better. It showed up in how I spent ordinary days. I stopped filling silence just to avoid it. I stopped answering questions I wasn't actually asked. I stopped assuming every problem needed to be solved immediately. Slowing down wasn't laziness. It was accuracy. I began paying attention to what actually drained me. Not just physically, but emotionally. Certain conversations, certain habits, certain expectations I kept carrying long after they stopped making sense. I realized how much of my energy had been spent maintaining versions of myself that no longer existed. For years, I thought consistency was the same thing as character. If I stayed the same, I believed that meant I was reliable. What I finally understood is that refusing to change can also be a form of fear. Sometimes you don't stay the same because it's right. You stay the same because it's familiar. Letting that go didn't make me unstable. It made me honest. Another thing changed too. I stopped waiting for the perfect moment to say things that mattered. Not because I suddenly became brave, but because I ran out of excuses. When you've buried someone you plan to talk to later, the word later loses its comfort. I started speaking plainly, not dramatically, just plainly. If something bothered me, I said it while it was still small. If something mattered, I treated it like it might not come back around. Most people don't understand how many relationships end not with arguments, but with delay. You wait too long to say something kind. You wait too long to apologize. You wait too long to ask a question you're afraid of the answer to. By the time you're ready, the moment has passed. That's not tragedy. That's math. I also stopped expecting closure from the past. For a long time, I believed that if I thought hard enough, replayed things enough, something would click and I'd finally feel settled. That's not how it works. The past doesn't resolve itself. It just sits there, unless you decide how much space it gets. I didn't forgive everything. I didn't forget everything. I just stopped carrying it everywhere I went. That alone made daily life lighter. One of the quietest changes was how I listened. I stopped listening to respond. I stopped listening for openings to explain myself. I listened to understand what someone was actually saying, even if it made me uncomfortable. That didn't make conversations easier. It made them real. People tell you who they are all the time. We just interrupt them with our assumptions. I also had to come to terms with the fact that some people will only know you as who you used to be. Not because they're unfair, but because that's the version you gave them. You can't demand people update their image of you if you never updated your behavior. That realization hurt, but it also freed me from trying to correct everyone's perception. I focused on being accurate instead of being approved of. At this stage in life, approval is overrated. Another lesson I learned late was about loneliness. I used to think loneliness meant being alone. What I know now is that loneliness is feeling unseen while being surrounded by people. I experienced plenty of that in my younger years and didn't recognize it for what it was. Now, my life is quieter. Some days, painfully so, but it's an honest quiet. There's a difference. I don't pretend anymore that noise equals connection. I choose my interactions carefully, not because I'm bitter, but because time is no longer abstract to me. Every hour has weight now. That makes you selective without making you cruel. I wish I could tell you that learning these lessons late didn't cost me anything. It did. It cost me moments I can't revisit, conversations I can't redo, versions of myself I'll never get back. But it also gave me something I didn't have before: clarity. Clarity doesn't erase regret. It just keeps you from multiplying it. If you're listening to this and thinking you recognize yourself somewhere in what I'm saying, that doesn't mean you failed. It means you're paying attention. That's earlier than most people start. You don't need to fix everything. You don't need to reinvent your life. You just need to stop lying to yourself about what matters and what doesn't. Most of the pressure you feel isn't coming from life. It's coming from expectations you never questioned. Roles you accepted without checking whether they still fit. Promises you made to versions of yourself that no longer exist. It's okay to outgrow them. I learned these lessons late, later than I should have, later than I wanted to, but not so late that they didn't matter. If you take anything from this, let it be this: don't wait for life to force clarity on you. It's much gentler when you choose it yourself. That's all I wanted to say. I don't have advice for everyone. I don't have answers that work universally. I just have the truth of a long life lived mostly on autopilot, and the quiet peace that came when I finally turned it off. Most people learn these lessons too late. I was one of them.